Hi there, I'm Francesca Gamble, living and working in London as the founder of two businesses and a life and wellbeing coach.
And I'm Francesca's Uncle Kevin, and yes, that's a real uncle, living and working in Oregon, USA as a priest, counselor, theatre director, and spiritual director.
Welcome to Becoming More Human.
An intergenerational, intercontinental, and always, we hope, interesting look at how we can survive and even thrive at being human.
Join us as we get stuck into life's most prominent questions and issues, drawing insights from our own personal and professional stories,
as well as the creative minds and works of our favourite artists and writers.
We invite you to share our conversation, figuring out what really matters on the journey to becoming more fully human.
So grab a cup of tea
or a glass of wine,
and let's begin.
Good evening, Uncle Kevin. How are you doing over there in Oregon today?
Oh, we're well, thank you, Fran. Yes, we're all here. We're all getting over Thanksgiving and then Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday, and every day of the week seems to have a different name at the moment. But no, we're well, thank you, and just settling down for the winter.
Well, we have a fantastic episode for everybody today. It's really pulled on our heartstrings as well. It's been one of these episodes that has felt very relatable, very current to what the situation that many of us are experiencing at the moment. We have fashion designer, business entrepreneur, Henry Holland. I should just mention, actually, just to make sure everybody's up to speed, that Henry's business went into administration at the beginning of COVID. So he has not only been having to deal with COVID like the rest of us, but he's also having to face certain challenges with his business and his own personal journey. And I think that's why it was such a great time to be able to speak to him, and such an interesting time. And his mother is such an inspiration, and somebody who's drummed in the spiritual teachings from such a young age, which I think is standing him in good stead whilst he's having to face these really personal and, big business challenges right now.
Yeah. So one of the realities, if you look at any spiritual tradition in the Northern Hemisphere, every spiritual tradition has a festival of light somewhere in the middle of the darkness. So from a spiritual perspective, whether it's Christmas, Diwali, Hanukkah, and then Kwanzaa, there are various traditions all gathered around light in the middle of the darkness. And what I learned from Henry is that in our personal lives, we also need the people of light that are there as beacons when we're personally going through a journey of darkness. So maybe we should get his mum on for an episode sometime down the road, and she can tell the story from her side. But it's really, I think people will, he's a fascinating character. He's somebody who followed his dream, and his dream almost came out by accident. And it's a journey that most people are too afraid to undertake. So I think that's the other thing that people will hear today, the courage to go with it and just try, and don't let the fear of failure stop you.
I couldn't agree more. And I think anybody who is at a crossroads, which I think fair to say probably most of us are at this point, thanks to COVID, it's made us address quite a lot of things in our life, and the direction of which we're going, and business and work plays a huge part in our lives. And I think Henry's vision and zest and passion for life and his will to succeed, I think people can get confused with this idea of just wanting to have a great time, but he's actually turned that into something even more. He's had a very clear vision about running a business, a global fashion empire, and he turned that into something wonderful. And, it's all credit to him. And anybody listening, if you do have a dream, you have to follow it. And I think something that we're learning across these episodes, talking to people, is consistency is key. Turning up every day to make something happen is what defines success.
That's the great thing about these interviews, Fran. All of us can learn something from everyone we've spoken with. So without further ado, let's have a listen to this great conversation with Henry Holland. Hope you all enjoy it.
Good afternoon, Henry. It's a joy to have you on this week's episode of Becoming More Human. So thank you for taking the time to share your story with our listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to get into the deeper things of life.
Hello, Henry. Nice to meet you. Always good to have another guy on the program. So thank you.
Well, to kick off the conversation, we ask all of our guests to share a creative medium. It could be anything from a song lyric, a film, a book. So Henry, what is your creative inspiration that reflects a turning point in your life?
If I've chosen a book, which is How to Lose Friends and Alienate People, which is a book by Toby Young, all about his life as a kind of a celebrity journalist living in New York who was working for Vanity Fair and how that all unraveled. And it was kind of, for me, it was the beacon of hope for me in the kind of journalism that I was wanting to eventually find myself in, and a world that I wanted to be a part of, which was this kind of glamorized world of celebrity and films and actresses and actors and fashion. When I read that book, that was kind of a real driving force for me to kind of go through the stages that I was currently finding myself in of my journalism degree, so that I could eventually find my way out. Because I think I saw school, I hated school, and I saw school as just this sort of restrictive place where I had to do as well as I needed to do to get to the next level. It was a bit like a computer game. So my GCSEs were the level to get me to my A levels. My A levels were, I did well enough to get to London. And then when I got to my course, and I quickly realized I wanted to be doing a fashion course, and then I tried to change my course. It was my motivation to stick with it and utilize my degree and make it into something that would be useful to me. So I then spent my entire 3 years at university working on the side for anybody who had the word fashion in their job title. I basically created a fashion journalism degree out of the degree that I'd kind of been stuck with. So I was doing assisting jobs, I was working with stylists, I was working in teen magazines on the side, and I was working 7 days a week just trying to build up some sort of level of experience in the world of fashion to accompany this, what I felt like was the wrong degree, so that once I did graduate, I would have something that resembled something that I would feel was useful.
That's a great story, Henry. Thank you. It's so hard when I keep reminding most of our guests I'm as old as you and Fran put together, and so I look back at my life and I think, yes, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I was 20, 25, 30 even. It was still a journey of becoming. So actually, hence the title of our podcast, because I'm very aware that every decade is about something different. And clearly, as you're now beginning your fourth decade, I believe, sort of where Fran is.
Not quite, but thank you very much for the reminder.
Well, you're over 30. Come on, you're over 30, aren't you?
I'm 37.
Okay,
but
so
those 3 years are very precious.
No, that means if you're 37, you're already in your fourth decade, because you've completed 3 decades, and now you're in your fourth decade. Yeah, sorry about that, folks.
But that does make perfect sense.
The 30s and the 40s are the best decades, but we need to remember where we come from. So fill us in a little bit about what was happening before that going off to London and getting that journalism degree, which in the end was the right degree, but the wrong degree, but the right degree.
Well, I think so. My childhood, I had a really happy childhood, a really happy family life. Like, my parents were separated, but that just meant that I had two families. That was always what I knew, and always I was always quite happy and comfortable with that. And I think it was my teens. So if we're talking decades, my teens weren't very happy. I got bullied at an all boys private school. So then I moved to a mixed school to kind of try and rescue me from that, this kind of toxic masculinity of 1,200 boys. So my mum sent me to a very small kind of co-ed school, which was the perfect place for me. Big fish, small pond, which is where I met my best friend, who I ran my business with for more than 10 years. And So I think if we're talking decades, in my head, I kind of wrote off my teens because I was like, this hasn't been that great. So I'm just using this as my stepping stone to get me to this kind of shining beacon of light, which to me was London. I grew up in a place called Ramsbottom, which was quite close-minded. It was quite insular. It didn't feel like it really reflected me as a person. In terms of like, the kind of thoughts and values of the people there, other than my immediate family, who I'm incredibly close to, and we have a really strong relationship. And so I just always had this sort of burning desire to be somewhere else. And all of these other processes were my means to an end to do that, I guess. That being said, like my last 2 years up north before I moved to London was some of the best of my life. My 17, 18, I met some of my closest friends. Most of my friends that I have now are still my friends from that point. I could probably count on both hands any really, really strong friendships that I have that I made after that point. I made incredible bonds with people in those formative years, and these are people that I knew instantly from that point would be with me throughout my life, and they have been.
And Henry, what in terms of those kind of close friends that you can count sort of across the two hands? I know that obviously for lots of people listening, we know that there will be the likes of Alexa Chung and Daisy Lowe, and they're all wonderful, wonderful women, especially a lot of them are very high profile in the press now. And strikes me that having known you for a little bit and having seen some of the interviews, a lot of the time some of your successes can get pinned back onto your friendship groups. And I understand we all live in a world where who makes a difference. Now, one thing that's really struck when you spoke about your closest friends is that you've made them from such a young age, and so many people won't know that. And what is it that you looked for back in the day, where there wasn't anything to do with being famous? There was no mention of celebrity status. That was all just pie in the sky. So these people you looked at for a reason, and Ramsgate wasn't kind of offering you anything. So what was it that kind of drew you to them?
Ambition. I think the common thread running between all of us. Well, I like you say, I often talk about people who, in air quotes, are considered celebrity friends or whatever. The people term them as. We all of us as a group of people became friends before anybody was famous, whatever words you want to use. We met each other at times when we were at similar stages in our respective careers, but the common thread that runs through all of us is ambition and drive, and also mutual respect of each other and each other's endeavors. We've always been hugely supportive of everybody, each other's projects, and whether that's people, my friends who you may know by name and my friends that you won't know by name, that is reflective across all of my friendship groups. Even, across those groups of friends, we're all super ambitious, we're super driven, and we are incredibly loyal and incredibly caring and incredibly authentic to who we are. And there's no falsehoods, there's no pretending to be something that you're not. And I think that's a real factor of coming from the north, being a northerner, coming from the north of England. There's a real self-effacing attitude and an openness. We tend to just open the doors to our hearts until people like us. I feel like that's a real northern trait. We overshare, and we'll give you everything that we can until we feel like you like us, and then we're comfortable. But if there's no kind of reticence to kind of give a piece of yourself. I think that's definitely something that comes from where I grew up. And as I said, a lot of my friends, whether I met them down here or I met them up there, they are northern. We're from the north of England, or we're from north of Birmingham. That's how I would. Manchester, Oldham, the valleys, all of those places. So I definitely think that has something to do with it.
So I want to unpack that idea of drive, and you want to be successful and stuff like that, because what I hear in that is I've heard it differently. In my generation, we might use different words. and that was about the sense that somebody might have a special vocation or a calling to be an artist, because artists in any genre, whether it's landscape gardening, fashion, painting, anything, people who have a sense of, I have something to contribute or contribute, depending which side of the Atlantic we're on, I have something to contribute that isn't going to get brought out of me if I don't open the door, because no one else knows there's a door to open.
Hmm. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, but I would add the word "I have a desire," because even just the wording that you use there fills me with a slight uncomfortableness that I would deign myself to feel I have something worthy to bestow upon everybody else. So I think I would reframe that only slightly by saying I have a desire to give something to the world. I have a desire to make a change to the world. I have a desire, there's definitely that burning desire that creates ambition, that creates drive, because I have something to say and I want people to hear it.
Yeah, and that is really the artistic thread of so many. Again, every generation, artists of different genres always have to find an edge. The fashion house that you started, tell us a little bit about what was the drive for that, the image and the serendipity of it.
Okay, so I started my label, which was called House of Holland, aged 22, I believe, and I was working in teenage magazines, and I was desperate to be part of the higher echelons of the fashion world. I wanted to be in the kind of high-end designer world of fashion, and I was very much the opposite end of the scale. Working on fashion pages aimed at, by the time we folded, a average readership age of 11 3/4.
So that sounds like the leading fashion magazine, if ever I've heard
yeah,
it.
exactly. I mean, they're obsessed with youth, and I was living and working in this world that was kind of its own little pocket of the fashion world, where I felt like I could be authentically myself. Nothing was taken too seriously. It was filled with fun and joy. Whereas when I sort of did dip my toe into these higher end versions of that world, I did start to feel I would close myself down a little bit. I was a bit worried that I would, say the wrong thing, put my foot in it, all those kind of things. Whereas I just felt comfortable in this world of teenage fashion. And just as a kind of side project, I started making these t-shirts, and it was kind of reflective of what me and my friends were wearing in nightclubs at the time. I was using nightclubs as a way to ingratiate myself into this different world of fashion that I wanted to be a part of, because on the dance floor, there were no airs and graces. Everybody was much more comfortable. Everyone was more chatty, much more open, more friendly. And that was my initial segue into the kind of more higher end world that I was wanting to be a part of. And then I made these t-shirts, which were rhyming couplets, based on some of my idols in the fashion world. So they were Yoo-Hoo, Gareth Pugh, Do Me Daily, Christopher Bailey, Get You Free, Con Giles Deacon, and Cause Me Pain, Hedy Slimane. And it was, in a way, it was my kind of way of kind of creating something that reflected me about that part of the fashion world. It was self-effacing, it was humorous, it was cheeky, it was a nod and a wink. In hindsight, what these t-shirts did pre-social media was allow the fashion world, who at the time were considered to be stuffy, bitchy, unfriendly, and pompous, it allowed them to show that they had a sense of humor and that they were capable of laughing at themselves and that they were in on the joke. And so I think that's what made them quite successful quite quickly.
Henry, did you feel then, and do you feel now still, that you had a lot to prove within the fashion industry?
Oh yeah, always, for years and years. I mean, I only really, like, in terms of, if we're talking like imposter complex, I only really got rid of that to a certain level by the time I shut the business earlier this year, because I'd been in business for more
Right.
than for almost 15 years. And so I felt like I'd proven myself to a certain level as a businessman. And I still struggled with people using the term fashion designer. I was much more comfortable with creative director, funnily enough.
Why is that?
Well, just because I hadn't studied as a fashion designer, and I felt like, early on in the early days of my career, certain reviewers and certain press would point that out quite regularly, and would kind of almost question how I felt like I had the right to be compared or to be, shown on a stage alongside some of the great artists of the fashion world who had been to some of the, leading creative colleges in the world. Whereas I was a journalism student with, a cheeky sense of humor and a shitload of ambition. That's how I continued to see myself.
Yeah, how did the imposter syndrome during that time impact you?
Um, luckily, I think I have enough focus and confidence in what I was doing and what I had to say that I still feel like I had it to say. It didn't stop me from continuing on the mission that I was on to kind of build a business and grow a brand and create something that was joyful and that was inclusive, and it made people want to be a part of it and to buy into it. It didn't dampen that spirit, but it definitely on the sidelines kind of ate at my confidence at certain times in the back of my head. But I was able to quieten it down enough.
One of the things that happened in my life with some friends was that we were all trying to work out what was our art form, because we knew we didn't fit into any of the categories. So if you could give yourself and invent your own art form, what do you think it might be? If you, are you now comfortable as a fashion designer? Are you a journalist? Are you? I'll tell you what I came up with, and that was, I realized my art form was arranging. I'm great with words. I'm not brilliant, but I can arrange colors. I can arrange fabrics. I can arrange stuff. Arranging is actually my art form. There's not a category for it. There's no degree for it. What would you say is actually your art form? What do you think? On the spot, anything come to mind?
Creating fun. I think,
Okay.
creating fun and joy for other people. I think the brand itself was what we were all about. Was about creating clothes that were fun and playful, and clothes that were fun and playful to wear, and communities uh, and content that entertain people and create a sense of joy. I think I remember as a kid, my mum once having an argument with one of my teachers because they said I wasn't concentrating, and she just, without missing a beat, was like, "Well, if you're not making it fun for him, why would he?" And she
Your
was
mum
like,
sounds amazing.
she was just like, "He's a boy who operates on fun. If he's having fun, you will have his undivided attention for as long as you need it, and so you have to think of a way that you can make this fun for him." And that was very much, I was so fortunate for the majority of my career, that I had the most fun that I could ever possibly imagine every single day. And that's what kept me motivated, it kept me engaged, and it kept me wanting to build and grow on everything step by step.
And how have you found that, Henry, with the juxtaposition of businessman?
Everyone removing the fun.
Yeah. As you get older, Henry, people become boring.
When there's a global pandemic and you can't leave the house and your business goes tits up, how are you finding that? Are you still having
Are
fun?
you still having fun?
I am trying my damned best. No,
What does fun look like for you now then? Now, that chapter in your life is it's come to a close. Where is fun for you now? Like, I'm sure you've had a lot of difficult conversations with yourself, with loved ones close to you. The nearest and dearest know you inside out. And there's only so much, a smiling face and a positive attitude can get you through. Or has it got you through? Has that exactly what you've relied on, and you've had to trust yourself more than you've ever trusted yourself before?
absolutely. But I mean, both of those things, I think, I've definitely been through a process of grief. you know, from losing something that I built from being such a young age, and for something that you know, I lived and breathed for nearly 15 years. Um,
Mm.
but I operate from a place of fun, but I also love change. I find change exciting, and I find if something changes, I don't focus on what's gone. I focus on the opportunities that have been created from what that could be. That I don't know. That's just how my brain is wired. But I think it's the way, you know, my mum instilled a complete belief system in me from a very young age, which as a kid I thought was embarrassing, and now I'm so grateful for.
Well, what is
Um,
her belief system? I'm keen to
well,
hear
I
it.
was taught about manifesting from being a teenage boy. When she had cancer when I was 8, we would cook in the kitchen singing Louise Hay affirmation tapes of
Wow.
I love and accept myself exactly as I am. Like that's what we would sing in the car. She has
Amazing.
been on, you know, she's been on numerous kind of retreats to learn lots of different kind of healing and meditation forms. And you know, when you wake up as a 13-year-old and your mum sat under a blanket in the living room, you're just like, oh, you roll your eyes and you're like, can you please not do that when my friends are here? And then, you know, just all the books that she talked to me about, you know, that just things that anybody could tell somebody else if it wasn't their mother, and they'd find it super engaging and interesting and probably be like, wow, I need to read that. But then, you know, when it comes from your mom as a teenager, you're just like, oh, can you just stop? But
I mean, we call it spiritual practice, but I guess you can call it, I mean, anything you like. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but in understanding how to manifest and positive affirmations, whether it's reading those right books, is that something that you grew up with then? That's been very much part and parcel of you as a person?
it's been ingrained in my belief system for as long as I can remember. I'm so fortunate. I haven't had to read the books because, you know, it's just been the way I was taught to exist. So, you know, if you, you know, the importance of gratitude, the importance of engaging with the universe, the importance of, you know, acknowledging when the universe does provide for you, and all of those things, and um, that, and if you know, trusting, believing that things will change, things will, you know, change at the right time, things will come to you as and when you need them, whether that be positive or negative, and all
How
of
much has
those
that
things.
been tested though now, Henry?
It's being tested. It has, and to be honest, you know, I do. Part of my imposter syndrome from my career, especially the early days, was how, not how easy it came, but how successful my company became very quickly. You know, in the time that it did, was often something that kind of questioned how hard I'd worked to achieve it, made me question how hard I'd had to work to achieve it, because it did. But you know, in the following years, I worked damn hard, and my entire team did, and you know, we realized every opportunity that presented itself, and that's why we were able to be successful. So I'm focusing on the newness and the opportunities that are being created, rather than what I'm grieving and what I've lost.
So is it too soon to call any of this a bit of a silver lining?
Um, Yeah, because I don't have a new job yet.
Oh, it's only money.
but um, but I am still kind of very aware, and I am very conscious that I'm still going through the process of it. And I have good days, I have bad days. I have weeks where I feel really productive and that I feel like, you know, I'm still achieving. I think my struggle really is being less busy, because however much in the back of my mind I always had, you know, in the minutiae of the day-to-day tasks, I was really busy, but the back of my mind, it was always building towards growing something to this kind of invisible final end, which never became or never would become, because I don't think you can ever get to a point where you feel like you've finished achieving in business. But I think that lack of constant busyness is something that provides a lot more time to think, which is challenging sometimes, and also the questions that it throws up. You know, what is next? What do I want to do? And being being so fortunate that, as I have been throughout my first 4 decades, thank you, that I've never I've every single career choice or every job that I've ever had, whether it be working in a tea shop as a waiter, to a shoe shop, to, you know, running my own business, I've absolutely adored every single job I've had. And so that does add a little added pressure, because I'm like, whatever I do next, I do feel the pressure to make sure that it is as joyful as everything that's come before.
Do you identify with the word failure at any points of your life or career so far? The black and white view is always the success versus failure, but with your sort of strong spiritual practice, I wonder how you start to reframe that idea of failure. There's so many people listening to the podcast, so many people we know who all run their own businesses, and this is one of the most hardest times we've all experienced. And just to understand a bit more how you have how you've overcome success versus failure as a black and white ideal. But the idea is, we know with your spiritual practice that breaks down to be so much more. But I think on the outside of it, so many people are looking at what they're experiencing in the face as quite black and white. So I wonder just how you start to decompartmentalize this idea of failure and looking at it completely differently.
I think in business, running a business, you experience levels of failure every day. And for me, the failures became instructions for my next endeavor. So they became, okay, that didn't work, so let's not do that again. And so, you know, this is probably my biggest learning. Well, running a fashion company like that didn't work. Let's not do that again, you know. Whereas, you know, more day-to-day version of that would be like, oh, let's not make something in that fabric ever again, or let's not launch something in that way, or let's not, you know, spend this much money on that kind of website. You know, there's failures that occur running, because, you know, that running a business operates on so many levels in tandem always, you know, whatever your kind of your business is, there's so many different levels to it. And so there's tiny successes and there's tiny failures every single day across every different section of your business and your brain. So I think, yes, this is probably the biggest one.
So to use different language, because I find success and failure are really, they're false words in most people's lives. The words I love are evolution and revolution.
We used to use that all the time at work.
Did you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So obviously you're on a great spiritual journey. But this is a revolution, and part of, you know, you've had these evolutions, and the COVID and the ending of House of Holland is a bit of a revolution. And the thing about revolutions is, anyone I know has ever undertaken them, and anyone, when you read in history as individuals or groups, it does take time to reassess what has changed within the structure of the organization, or even in the structure of the self. I will say, when I was your age, was the year I decided to leave England and go to America. I mean, a complete revolution, and take a new degree and change my direction completely. So I, looking back again as the old man, say, oh, how exciting. You have this wonderful opportunity to reinvent yourself yet again and use all the wisdom you've gathered from that experience, and then make your own mark going forward. So if you were to sort of, have you yet got to the point where you have an idea of where the revolution is going for you? Once COVID is over, maybe give yourself a bit of a break, and then what?
So I absolutely love the terminology of evolution and revolution. That's something that we always used to, you know, question about the way that we would do things in the brand. You know, is this an evolution or is this a revolution? So I definitely feel like I'm going through a revolution. I haven't 100% figured out yet. I think, you know, one of the things that I loved and really served me well with my previous job was that I was able to do about 12 jobs every single day. You know, I could be a production manager, you know, a pattern cutter, a marketeer, you know, all of these different things all within one day. And that really suited me because it allowed me to kind of be quite sort of, it held my attention by keeping it, you know, interesting. And I think my challenge is finding one really strong key direction and feeling strong enough about it that I know that that is my next revolution. I know that there's lots of different things that I want to do, and I'm lucky enough that I'm able to do some of them already, and I'm starting to work with different people and in different projects, but I'm just waiting for something really meaty to sink my teeth into, and I don't yet know what that is, but I know I'm going to have to create it for myself. I know it's not going to come for me.
So I'm going to ask you a question somebody asked me when I was in my fourth decade, and that was, who do you want to be when you grow up?
I keep talking about my mom, but I once asked her, how old were you when you felt like a grown up? And she said, still waiting, and she's 76. And that's my only answer. I don't ever want to grow up, because I think it's a mentality. I think the way that I ran my business was very much in a way that didn't feel grown up, and that made people question it, whether the seriousness of it, and that always frustrated me because I was always incredibly serious about my employees, the jobs I was creating, the money I was making. I was always very serious about that, but the way in which we did it, what doesn't have to be serious. So in terms of what I want to be when I grow up, I don't know. I don't think I want to grow up. It would be my answer.
What is your biggest life lesson to date?
Be true to yourself. I think that my biggest piece of advice whenever anybody asks me about getting into the fashion industry is just, I try and impress upon them how exhausting it is, and how much a piece of your heart and soul you have to put on the table with each collection, or each, whatever it is you're working on, and doing that through kind of inauthentic sort of tinted glasses is just going to make it's exhausting enough as it is. So you have to be presenting yourself at your best, and not trying to be something that you're not, because I just think people will see through that, and it will just create such an internal fight within yourself. It would be impossible to exist.
That is fantastic advice. That's especially in fashion, when something's so presentable from the outside rather than from the inside out. It's the misconception as well, I think, on that side. So what 3 words would describe becoming more human for you?
So for me, I wrote these down. I wrote friendship, authenticity, and joy. And I think I didn't even intend to talk about all of those 3 things.
You have covered them all off.
I know, amongst our existing chat, but apparently I'm very shallow. There's only 3 things you can talk to me about. But those are the key words. Being human to me are my relationships, my friendships, with friends and family, and authenticity is so key, and all of those in themselves create joy.
Fantastic. The last question: do you have a guiding thought or mantra that you now live by?
So I do, and again, it's something I've inherited from my mother, but it would be feel the fear and do it anyway, which is another incredible book which she made me read. But then yesterday, I was watching a fashion film online as part of this new Gucci Fest, this new kind of fashion medium that they launched this week. And one of the male models in this film said the following: "You can't be everyone's cup of tea. That would make you a mug."
Well, on that note, Henry Holland.
Even though I only heard that yesterday, it's a strong contender for my new life mantra.
That is strong, and if you've got any sense, Henry, you'd go and put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, it doesn't rhyme. I'm trying to work on it.
Like we all are. Work in progress, Henry. Work in progress.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. It's been such a wonderful, very joyous chat. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Henry, delightful to meet you. And I will honestly say, you are doing, if I got my life to live over again, I would do your life. Because because my grandmother bought me a sewing machine when I was about 8 or 9, and it didn't go down very well at home. And so I was a fashion queen who, and a fabric queen particularly, who completely submerged everything, and I never got quite. So my next life, I want to do what you did. So thank you for sharing your story.
Well, you have a whole lot of life left to get that sewing machine out, so I'll be keeping an eye.
I've done a few, theatre costumes and stuff like that. Yeah, that's my therapy,
Amazing.
is getting the sewing machine out. So thank you. I love hearing your story, because it's what I didn't do, and I hope other people who hear your story will go, damn it, I'm going to try it.
I really hope so. It is worth it.
It is absolutely worth it to be authentic and to become your true self, regardless of the cost.
Amazing. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, guys. That was so much fun. That was like therapy. That was free therapy. I feel incredible.
Well, we're here every Tuesday. What a brilliant way to end that interview. Laughing. I have to say, I don't think I've laughed so much during an interview and learnt so much from such a wonderful, passionate, vivacious character of Henry Holland. And he doesn't like the term fashion designer. I'm coining him business entrepreneur. There is so much about that guy. Who knows where he will turn his hand to next when it comes to his next big chapter of his life. But I thought throughout that whole episode, he is learning so much during such difficult time, and how much we can all take from it ourselves. Don't you think, Uncle Kevin?
Yes, Fran. The idea that the person is more important than the product is very important in this whole process. So what was delightful to see is who Henry Holland has become this year, and how Henry has changed this year, irrespective of how he manifests that in the world. It's lovely to see his enthusiasm. I know a lot of people can relate with this idea of, I don't want to grow up. Being an adult is very, very boring. Being an adult means dealing with all the boring stuff, the difficult stuff, the stuff that none of us really want to do. But when one has responsibilities, whether it be a family, a job, a business, then we have to make time for being an adult. But the nice thing is, we all have to remember to make time for being a child too, because that's our natural essence. Our natural essence is to enjoy being alive and making the world a better place to live in for one another. So that playfulness, that willingness to try and to keep trying and to come back and try again was great. I was reminded actually of the quote that's above the players' entrance at Wimbledon. It's the quote from Rudyard Kipling's poem, If. And if I remember it correctly, it says, if you can experience success and failure and treat both imposters the same, then you will become a man, my son, or a daughter, or a woman, my daughter. So I think that's the important lesson here, that success and failure are both external realities. Who we are as a person is what matters. And it's our personhood that becomes greater over the years if we do the work.
Thank you so much, Uncle Kevin, for that. I think the key outtake for this, and for me throughout all of these episodes, is just do the work. Leaning into it is uncomfortable, but sometimes we don't get that opportunity. Life will just throw us that curveball. And, for Henry, it's thrown him a big curveball, but by the sounds of it, he's leaning well into it. And I'm sure he'll go on to even more success, both personally and professionally. So thank you so much, Uncle Kevin, for those wonderful words as always.
You're very welcome. And I hope you have a wonderful week, getting ready for the holidays probably, and dealing with whatever little things get thrown at you this week, and to all our listeners too. Whatever comes up, we'll see you same time, same place next week.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast.